This session, Gary will facilitate a great topic, which is facilitating resilience in turbulent times. We all are living in a turbulent times, and we will learn a lot, I think, in this session. Thank you, Gary, for accepting our proposal and being here. It's great to have you here. There are we have some newcomers. I will control them.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. My name is Gary Austin. I'm 50% of a facilitation consultancy now in its 20th year called Circle Indigo. I am pleased to say that my business partner is somewhere in here too, Justine, so I know she's here. And you will also see that there is a Circle Indigo 2 login. That's because I'll be running from 2 devices today. So my desktop that I'm speaking to you from, and from the iPad, which is dialed into the Zoom as Circle Indigo 2. So I'm going to be flicking between screens. And then also we're going to do and have an opportunity to do a little bit of work a little bit later in breakout groups. So as I said, my name's Gary. We're a 20-year-old facilitation consultancy. We develop and design and run meetings, workshops and events cross-industry, cross-sector, and our clients are pretty much across the world. I should also mention that I currently sit on the International Association of Facilitators Global Board, along with Celeste. And my role is, I'm Director of Communications. And that means looking after all the comms that come out to members and helping structure that. And also I have responsibility for the website. And I'm very pleased to say that the first drop of the refresh website will go live, hopefully tomorrow, if not Monday. I've been a member of the IAF since 1994, when I was just 12. And I spent a year as chair of the association in 2000. And in 2000, we had our global conference in Toronto, and we had close to 1,900 people at that conference, which to this day remains the largest gathering of global facilitators, and maybe we can break that at some point in the future. I'm also a certified professional facilitator on that scheme and continue to support people through that scheme around the globe. So the last thing I need to mention really is my session today around building resilience came out of some work that we did. So I'm a visiting lecturer at the University of Westminster here in London on an MSc Business Psychology program. And this resilience work that we created and built is largely based around some research that was done by the MSc Business Psychology students for their final thesis. And I'll share a bit more information about that when we get to that part of the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen here, so you'll see me disappear and everyone else, and I'm going to share the slide deck that I have. I've got a slide deck on here, and then we're going to do some work on the iPad as well. I'm just going to give that a second or two to drop it into everyone's screens. So I'm hoping everyone can see that now. So as I said, the name of the session, Building Resilience in Turbulent Times. My name is Gary Austin. The company that we have is called Circle Indigo. The purpose and I guess an agenda, as we should always start with when we're facilitating sessions, is outlined as you can see on the screen. So we're going to talk a little bit around the difference between change and transition. So when we talk about managing change and managing transition, what's the difference between the two? We're going to build up something called the transition curve, and that's when I'll switch to the iPad. But I also have a slide of the actual curve as well. This may be familiar to some people, but it's been added to and amended by us here at Circle Indigo. A very, very brief history of what we define as resilience, outline the research projects that gave us the work, and then to walk through and understand the Circle Indigo key characteristics of resilience model. And I'll explain a bit more when we get to that now, but this is currently work in progress because the original work was done in 2009, and we've just spent some time refreshing the model and revisiting it and updating it. And then we're all going to do some work together jointly to identify possible tools, techniques, processes, approaches, etc., that could support the development or the building up of those key characteristics in the resilience model. So as we move through, I'm just going to share a little bit around the definitions and the difference between what we mean by change and what we mean by transition. So obviously we are definitely living in turbulent and uncertain times at this very moment. And it's important to understand the difference between change and transition. So some of you may be familiar with William Bridges' work. William Bridges wrote a really great book called Managing Transition. I do have a bibliography slide at the end of the deck, and I'm obviously more than happy to share the deck after the session. So it talks, Bridges talks a bit around, it's not the changes that do you in, it's the transitions, and they're not the same thing. So change is not the same as transition. So change is situational. So the new site, the new boss, the new role, the new policy, global lockdown and having to work from home if you've not done that before. And that's the physical, the situational thing, that's the change. And Bridges outlines that transition that's different from the change, and the transition is the psychological process people go through to come to terms with that new situation. So for example, coming to terms with having to work from home or having to work virtually or online. So change is external and transition is internal. And that transition is a disruption of people's thinking, feelings, and behavior. Okay. I am happy to, if anyone has any specific questions as we go through, but I'm also very conscious there was about 101 people, so I don't want to open up too much at this point. But please, if you have something specific. So I'm going to move to the next slide. Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry, that's the one I didn't want you to see. So, apologies. Too keen to move to the other slide. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share from the other screen, and just by a quick show of hands, how many people are familiar with the change curve, or what, as it should be called, the transition curve? If you just put your hands up. So some people will be familiar with that. A couple of people's hands going up. Yeah, cool. Okay. So I'm going to switch to my other okay, can everyone see that now? Just a nod or yeah, cool. Thanks, John. Good to see you. So this is the axes for the transition curve, okay? So the axes that you can see on the screen on your left-hand side is an axis for personal effectiveness, morale, motivation, and self-confidence. And the axis you can see at the bottom is the axis for over a period of time. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through the session. So the transition curve looks something like this. Okay. And there are a number of key points on the transition curve. So people who are not familiar with this model originally started from some work done by a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had a model for grief and a model that people, and the things that people experience after a bereavement or after a death. And we've taken that model and adapted it to a business or personal or organizational context. So you can see from this curve that over a period of time, individuals, because this is an individual curve, individuals' personal effectiveness, morale, motivation, and self-confidence all come down. So they all take a hit. And over a period of time, as people get used to the transition, used to the situational change that they may find themselves in, all of those things will come back up again. So your self-confidence will begin to build, your morale and motivation begin to pick up, and your personal effectiveness and productivity begins to get better. But for those of you that know the model and for those of you that don't, there are a number of key stages that people go through. So for example, early in the transition, we often go through a stage of denial. So it's like, what do you mean we're going into lockdown? What do you mean I'm going to have to work from home? What do you mean all of my work stopped on the 17th of March and we've not had any since? All of those things are going, don't worry, it'll all pick up. And we go through a period of denying the situation that we find ourselves in. As we begin to understand a little bit more about what's happening, we go through a period of being a little bit frustrated, a little bit confused. What do you mean I'm going to have to use this thing called Zoom more often? What do you mean there's all these multiple tools that can support me, like Miro, Mural, Concept Board, visualfacilitator.com, many things. And then we go through a period of feeling guilty. Oh, actually, I'm at home. The weather's been really nice. I'm not doing as much work. Doesn't feel too bad, but I do feel guilty for some other people that are experiencing things, maybe in a stronger or in a different way. And then as we get towards the bottom of the curve, we go through a period of feeling quite angry, maybe feeling a little bit of anxiety, and then getting to a point where actually we're feeling fairly low, fairly down with the situation. But as things begin to change, and as we begin to understand more, maybe we begin to come up the other side. So we start exploring new ideas. So we begin to maybe use some of those new tools that we've not experienced before, try things out in a different way, move some of the stuff we've done before onto virtual or online. We begin to test out different ways of doing things. We begin to adopt new ways of working to a point where we're quite acceptant of the new situation, and then we are fully committed to moving forwards in whatever the new normal is. And the thing about this is that everybody will go through this over a different period of time. So some of us might go through these things fairly quickly. Some of us might take quite a long time to go through this transition curve. Some of us will have a less deep, a more shallow curve than others. Some of us will, as I said, be squashed up in terms of time and go through it quite quickly. And we all know people that like a lot of change, like a lot of transition, but we also know a lot of people that don't like to do change or to go through change. But there are some other important things that we can add to this model, because we can break this down into 4 quadrants. So it's important to understand this line across the middle, so this one here, because there's a number of things that we can talk about here. Is that in this top left-hand quadrant where it has denial, frustration, confused, and guilt, quite often for people, these things can be seen and these things can be heard, and they are quite often visibly out in the open. And it's when people get into this bottom left-hand box, this anger and anxiety and feeling pretty low and pretty depressed, that quite often these things become internal and remain hidden. So it's important to think about what are some of the things that we can do in order to lower this line, to get more stuff out in the open, because the more stuff we can get out in the open, then the better placed we are in order to deal with it and manage it, both as individuals and also in supporting each other. And then I just want to add the other axes on the bottom here is that quite often all of this stuff is related to what's gone on in the past, and all of this stuff is related to what will happen in the future. But the area of most concern for many people is actually this bottom left-hand quadrant. And that is because it's in here where there is the most concern, both for individuals and potentially for teams going through the current situation. because it is in here where potentially you get the most resistance to the transition and often active and open sabotage. And unfortunately, that can be things like openly not doing things that you're being asked to do, but the resistance and sabotage can often be quite personal. That means, unfortunately, when people are feeling like they do in this bottom left-hand quadrant, the resistance and sabotage becomes individual and personal. So for some people, this will mean increased use of drugs, increased use of alcoholism. You may potentially see other things happening particularly in the home. So domestic abuse, and all of these things, this is where potentially, not for everyone, but for some, where this resistance and sabotage becomes personal. So before I move on, I'm just going to open that up and ask if anybody has any questions at all, bearing in mind we have 103 people in the session. Does anyone have any questions, or anyone have, or you can pop it in the chat, as some people are. So yeah, so Chetna, you said, I feel these are non-hierarchical. And if by that you mean that actually we go through them in a particular order, that's fairly, I would agree with that. Sometimes we move quite quickly through, and actually we can move quite quickly from the left-hand quadrant to the top right-hand quadrant. The name of the model is called the transition curve. One of the ways we move this line down, I can see so has been asked, is we build resilience. And therefore, by building resilience, you can pull this line down and people are better able to manage some of this stuff that's going on for them and better manage to move it out into the open. The thing with this curve, and somebody says, is it possible to move quick and then to come back and redo the curve again? Absolutely. So you might come through the curve, begin to come up the other side, begin to find out a bit more, explore new ideas, and then you either find out something new about your situation, or you find out something about someone else, and you can very easily slosh backwards and forwards from this side. Hang on, I'm just going to I'll add another color. From this side back to here, and then back to here. And if we build resilience, what we're trying to do is make sure you go through it like this, in a much quicker way, and to do more of this stuff out in the open. The exceptions as individuals, that's a good question. And actually, for our experience with this model is that we all go through these things, and sometimes we go through them so quickly that we might not even realize we're going through them. So you might go through all of these things fairly quickly and then come up, come quickly out the other side. And sometimes you maybe you spend a bit more time in some of these other areas and spend more time kind of being a bit frustrated. Or you spend more time down here. Or actually you move through quite quickly and you spend a lot of time exploring new ideas, testing things out, and trying to do things in a different way in whatever the new normal is. So that's a really good question. Can we also spend more time, or can we shift the line down by spending more time with people who have already moved to core Q3 and Q4? I think that's a really good question. So I think what might be helpful is I'm going to go back to the other screen, if that's okay, and I'm going to share from my other screen, because I think there is some stuff in there that will begin to answer some of those questions. And I will pick up that question around personality types as well. So here is the version that's on the slide version, which obviously you got a sneak preview of because I've managed to put it up before we move to the session, to the other device. So just building on some of those questions. So the thing that obviously helps people move through this is for them to understand that A, they're not the only person going through it, and B, that there are others experiencing what they're experiencing. And one way to do that is through engagement. So the question that came about, can other people help that have already moved through the curve? Absolutely. We call this the 4 cornerstones. So this builds on the curve. And this was some work we did. You can see bottom right hand of the screen when we were part of an internal management consultancy for one of the large banks here in the UK about 20 years ago, or more than that now. And we realized that as people move through the curve and as they drop into different quadrants, they look for and need different things. So when you first announce a change, when you're first in a transition, the thing that people look for the most is clear factual information, as much as you can give and as much as you can get. And then obviously information doesn't stop when you move through support into support, and support doesn't start in that bottom left-hand quadrant, but it's what people look for the most when they are there. And so that kind of support might be, you know, some tutorials how to use some stuff. So if you're looking at new tools or having to use new tools, it might be putting in place some lessons or some demonstrations. If it's potentially that you're about to lose your job, that kind of support might be things like counseling. It might be providing support in terms of how to update CVs, how to give good presentations. So there's all different kinds of support that you can put in place depending on the situation and the context. As people begin to move up the curve on the right-hand side, the thing that they look for most is clear direction and guidelines, i.e. boundaries. So what can I do? What can't I do? What am I allowed to do? And how am I supposed to work? Give me clear direction, give me clear guidelines. And then as people move to the top, actually what they're looking for is encouragement and reward. And that can be as simple as praise, or it can be other forms of reward as well, both intrinsic and extrinsic. And so absolutely people that have moved through the curve can help pull other people through from the left-hand side through engagement. But conversely, sometimes you find people that are stuck down in that bottom left-hand quadrant can pull people back from the other side. I always used to share a story that when I worked in the bank here in the UK, that we knew people that were stuck in that bottom left-hand quadrant, still moaning about a change or a transition that had happened to them 5-10 years ago, and still were trying to complain and sabotage the change that they'd been through. So I'm just going to pause. I can't see if there is anything in the chat right now. But what are we trying to do through building resilience? So we're trying to achieve something called dynamic balance. And again, bottom right of the screen, you can see that this work comes from somebody called Daryl R. Conner. Daryl R. Conner, I think, wrote one of the best books about managing change and transition, and it's called Managing at the Speed of Change. Again, it's in the bibliography at the back. So he talks about that we have a current situation that we find ourselves in. So that would have been pre-pandemic and pre-lockdown, for example. And then something happens. Oh, crikey, we have a global pandemic. We have a lockdown in sometimes a bit earlier, depending on which country you were in. And actually what we're trying to do is move to the future. And that future may be something completely different. And what we're trying to achieve is dynamic balance. And for those of you that don't know what that image is, that's a gyroscope, and it's a form of a spinning top. And if you set a gyroscope off and then you knock it, something happens, you give it a nudge, it wobbles a bit, and then it comes back upright and continues to spin. Because there is no stability anymore, as we know. So we think actually the gyroscope is a good metaphor for continuing to spin, take a knock, sometimes quite a big knock, but come back up, righten yourself and continue to spin. Because we live in a world of constant turbulence. So what we're trying to do is make the transition less turbulent, moving from that current situation to that dynamic balance, a horrible phrase, but that new normal, whatever the new normal might be. And what we find is people with low resilience have a very, very turbulent journey moving from current to future. Bit like a roller coaster, or sometimes Justine, my colleague, will liken this to the heart monitor. When you're having a really bad, stressful time, your heart monitor goes up and down much quicker. I always think it's a bit like one of those scary roller coaster or a scary ride at one of the theme parks. So if you have low resilience, that's going to be a very turbulent journey. If you have high resilience, that's going to be a much less turbulent, much less rocky road. It will never be a straight line because there will always be some ups and downs, but it will be a lot less like a roller coaster journey. Hopefully that's all making sense. So, a brief history of resilience. So resilience is a pseudoscience. It's a combination of two sciences, physics and biology. So from physics, we get the definition of resilience being elasticity, buoyancy, and the ability to quickly return, often stronger, to the original shape. And from biology, we take from Darwin the survival of the fittest. The things that have survived the most are the things that have been most resilient. And then two definitions from colleagues. So this is a 1994 definition from a guy called Stefan van Estendel. This is a personal resilience definition. So it's a combination of the human capacity to face adversity and resist destruction, willingness to evolve and develop, often in spite of the adverse conditions, like many of us probably are now, finding ourselves in a different situation and having to learn new things and develop oneself, build one's skills, despite or in spite of what's going on around us. And then to use that adversity to learn and transform oneself. And for some of my colleagues from the IAF that I know are in the session, one of our former, or still a colleague, Gil Branson-Lazan, from 2003, a definition of group resilience, the ability to face internal or external crisis, not only effectively resolve it, but learn from it, be strengthened by it, and emerge transformed, both individually and as a group. And the thing that strikes me between these two definitions is actually there's not much difference. So we can see that if you can build resilience in an individual, you can also do it at a team level and an organizational level. So, as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm a visiting lecturer at the University of Westminster here in London in the Business Psychology Centre. We run sessions on managing change and transition, building resilience and facilitation skills for the Business Psychology MSc program. And way back in 2009, which seems a long time ago now, we were asked to sponsor two research projects that formed the basis of two thesis final pieces of work for students. And originally we put in two, and we thought only one of them would be selected. But in hindsight now, having the two selected by students was a huge benefit. The first was a theory-based research. So we asked Irene to go away and research and find all of the recognized frameworks and models of resilience that already existed. And she created her final piece of work on towards a business methodology for frameworks and models of resilience. And actually she had a huge folder of like what were quite literally hundreds of different models and frameworks of resilience, and then came back with what were all the common things, therefore a common business methodology across all of those models. And then the second piece of research work was much more practical. So Katie picked up a piece of work for us that was about investigating what makes individuals resilient or adaptive to major change. And we gave her access to, I think, about 12 or 15 of our clients that had gone through big change programs. And she did a quantitative and qualitative survey with them around what did they call on, what did they use, what did they find helped them when they went through what did they use or call on when they went through the major change. And what we ended up with was a 5 key characteristics of personal resilience model. So we took the two pieces of research, which was great because it was practical research and theory research. And we narrowed it down to 5 key characteristics of personal resilience. And this is the model that we created in 2009. So the first key characteristic was understanding self-worth. And I've got some definitions for these, but they're in the recut model, which is the next slide. The second key characteristic was having personal discipline and responsibility. The third one was being able to use social networks. And I use the social in the broadest sense, not social as in social media. The fourth key characteristic was taking a holistic approach, being able to see the bigger picture. And the last one was about being open. open to new ideas, open to new ways of doing things, etc. So we realized that this was a 2009 model, and then subsequently other things have become more relevant and more prevalent. So Justine and I have been working on this recently, and you'll see bottom right, it says WIP. So this is still work in progress. And this is the 2020 version of the key characteristics of personal resilience. So here is the original 5, understanding self-worth. Slight difference, you'll see having self-discipline, that we've split that one out and the others are still there. And here are the new ones. So we split out from self-discipline, taking personal responsibility. And then we added in the new one, which was the most obvious one to add in, which is about managing well-being, because that's become much more relevant and much more prevalent since 2009. And then I'm going to share the descriptors with you. So in understanding self-worth, the common things that came out in terms of descriptors for understanding self-worth was showing emotional maturity, recognizing your own talents and strengths, being self-confident, and continually carrying out self-reflection and correction. So spotting where you needed to change, what you needed to do in order to change. Taking personal responsibility was about demonstrating behavioral adaptability and flexibility. So being able to adapt, being able to flex where you needed to, but remaining and being true to your personal values and ethics, facing up to the reality of the situation, not denying what was going on around you, and the willingness to tackle and to manage what can be some quite difficult situations. Having self-discipline was about being structured and focused, make sure that you're planning ahead and actually doing what you say you will do. Engaging through your social networks meant engaging in dialogue, working with and seeking support from others. And this directly addresses the question that was in the chat when I was on the iPad around, actually, you know, if you work and seek support from others, you can pull yourself through that transition curve quicker. Maintaining and forming relationships, and important, making time for friends and family. The descriptor for taking a holistic approach was about understanding the bigger picture, being aware of the wider context, and most importantly, knowing where you sit and fit within that. And the descriptors common across all of the models in being open was being curious, seeing things from others' point of view, making sure that you live to learn, that you know that you're always in a learning situation and a learning opportunity, but also knowing that you might not know something, and therefore being open to finding out how you can do that. And then lastly, the big one, the managing well-being is a kind of a big bucket of stuff around taking care of yourself. So that's both physically and mentally. It's about making sure you've got balance. And I often wonder now, as we're in pandemic and lockdown, you know, how has people's balance been in terms of working from home and being at home? Remaining optimistic, which sometimes can be difficult, and holding on to humor and making space for having fun. So again, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to just stop the share. And I can see there's some stuff in the chat, and I'll try and come back to some of these things. So there's a couple of questions in there around personality. I think that does play a part, and somebody's talked about the big 5. That's the Jungian big 5. And I do think that personality plays a part. I also think something that plays a big part, which is something that we've been looking at, is mapping culture. So it's about mapping geographic culture and how different cultures deal with managing change differently as well. And there's some of you, and I'll put it in the chat, there's a really great piece of research that was done by a lady called Erin Meyer, who works for one of the big organizational development consultancies called INSEAD, who some of you may have heard of. And she wrote a really great book, which builds on the geographic cultural piece. And it builds on some work that was done in the 60s and 70s by a guy called Eric Hofstadter, and he has what was called Hofstadter Dimensions, which is about how places around the world deal with things differently. And she's mapped well over 50 geographic cultures on a scale of 8 different 8 different spectrums about how we manage and deal with different stuff. And so I definitely think that there is a play for culture, there is a play for personality type as well. Because the more you know about your personality, the more I think you can put things in place, which means the more you can be resilient in these situations. So the question around where was the research done? The research was carried out here in London at the University of Westminster, but the 2 students that carried out the research, one was a Greek student from Athens, and the other one was a German student from Berlin.
Hello.
Is that someone with a question?
No, Yuki, am vorbeam să eram curios cât să le dau, dar
Maybe it's not a question.
așa arată.
I'm going to share the screen again because I'm going to ask you to go into some breakout rooms, and Rengen is going to help me do this. So in your breakout rooms, and I think we've got about 103 people here, which means across 14 breakout rooms, there should be roughly 7, maybe 8 people in each of these rooms. And what I'm going to ask you to do in your breakout room is I want you to think about, you might be designing a facilitated session. It could be a coaching session, could be a participant workshop. And if you were to take these 7 key characteristics listed on the left-hand side in the table, so these were the characteristics we just ran through: understanding self-worth, taking personal responsibility, having self-discipline, connecting through social networks, etc., etc. What might be some of the ways you could help groups or individuals build up or extend that particular characteristic you've been allocated in your room? So it might be tools, it might be techniques, it might be processes, approaches, questions, different activities. So what could you do to help somebody build up and understand their self-worth more? What could you do to encourage people to be open? What could you do to encourage people to take an holistic approach and see the big picture? So originally, because we weren't sure on the numbers, I put this second paragraph in that said, as the breakout groups might be quite large, please do make sure as many people as possible get a chance to be heard if they want to. But by my rough calculation, with around 100 and odd people, that should be about 7 people, so that's not too bad. And I'm going to ask a favor. Would somebody please keep track and make a few notes of your responses as you go into the session? So you can either take a quick screenshot or a quick photo of this, because you'll see that rooms 1 and 8 have the first characteristics, 2 and 9 the second one, etc. As you go into your rooms though, Rengen has very kindly renamed the rooms from breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4 to the name of the key characteristic that we're asking you to look at when you drop randomly into your breakout room. And I'm going to ask you to spend a good chunk of time, because sometimes normally we would spend a lot more time doing this when we're face to face, but I'm going to cut that down quite a bit. And I'm going to ask you to spend 15 minutes in your breakout rooms, just having a discussion around the key characteristic that you've been allocated, and identifying some of the things that you could do in order to build or extend or develop that key characteristic. If you want to capture it in the chat in your room, that's an option, but then someone will need to cut and paste that chat back into the main room chat when we come back. But we will go through a process of review and running through each of the rooms and capturing some of the key information that you've built whilst you've been in the breakout room. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to ask Rengen to drop you randomly into rooms. So take a note of which rooms, and as I said, as you drop into the room, you will see the name of the characteristic that you've been given. And I'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you, Rengen.
Okay, all you need to do, just click on join button on your screen.
There's no join button, Gary.
Okay. Okay, Rengin?
It's coming. Since there are a lot of people, it's still working.
I am with the mobile. I imagine it doesn't affect that.
Even on mobile, it works, I guess. I will see if you will not assign.
How are we doing, Rengin?
Most of them is okay. There are just a few people later. As co-host, can you visit the rooms?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think I can only join one of them though.
I think so, yeah.
How are we doing? Still got quite a few people in here. They're slowly dropping off.
Why it takes this much time? Are there still? Yes.
Yeah, there's still a few here. This is going, oh, there we go. There's a few dropping out now.
I think all should be assigned. But I see still some people here.
Yeah. There, it is going down there.
I think it takes time for them. Because in the screen, all assigned. There is no one unassigned here.
Okay, cool. Hey, John, have you got a join button yet? John? Oh, there we go. So we have a few people left here by the looks of it. So I am happy if we want to open. Obviously because I'm here and I'm going to stay here whilst we people are in the breakout. So if there's people are still here, if there's anyone that wants to ask any questions, and I'm obviously, as we're a small but perfectly formed group of people that aren't in breakouts, I'm happy to take any questions. Alternatively, you might be eating your lunch, and that's fine too.
Can you help me to go to another breakout room? Because no one is there in my room right now.
Okay, then please go to main room and I will assign you to a different room.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
in the main room right now.
he is in. Yeah, he is in
Yeah.
the main room, Rengi.
In the main room?
He is here in the main room. This is the main room.
Okay. Sorry, can you please tell me your name?
My name is Vidal.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
here, I serve you. Okay, sorry.
You can add me to taking personal responsibility
Response.
because I was in that same room.
Okay,
Like, yeah.
it is the
So,
second room. I'm assigning. Okay.
okay.
Rengin, did you set the breakout for 15 minutes? Yeah.
They have 6 minutes more.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Actually, although I asked, I've defined random distribution, there are just 5 or 6 people in some and 10 or 11 in some other rooms.
Yeah, I know sometimes it does go a bit bonkers. It looks like Viral is still here as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So would you like to join some rooms?
Yes, sure. Maybe taking personal responsibility.
It's interesting. So sorry, Beryl. You are not seen on my screen, and
No problem. That's okay. I think so.
okay, no, no, it's not you.
Maybe hardly 1 or 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's okay. No problem. I'll stay here.
You're welcome, Viral.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Anything you...
No, I said nothing. I said get it right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, we all finished, so we are back.
Cool, thank you.
Okay,
Welcome.
just 2 more minutes. Do you want me to close all rooms or?
No, leave it, let it run. Because as you said, some of them look like they've got more people in than others. So
Yes, yes.
we'll let it run and then we'll pick up when people. Welcome back, people. Nice to see people coming back there. It's always a pleasure when people come back from breakout rooms, either when you're in face-to-face or virtually. It's when they don't come back. It's when they don't come back you get worried, right? You've either lost them or they can't find the room. Which group? The group that have arrived back. What characteristic were you looking at? Anyone?
Holistic approach.
Holistic approach. Okay.
Okay, it's time. I'm closing all rooms and they will have 1 minute more to come back.
Okay. Thank you, Renga.
You're welcome. Yes. All's back, I think.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. So a few people, we're just going to give it a kind of 30 seconds just to make sure everyone is back. So I'm hoping that you ended up in a room with some people that you'd not met before.
Yes.
I'm also hoping that you ended up in a room where you had a good discussion.
Yes.
Gary, sorry, it's Michelle. Can I quickly test something? I just want to see if I can access my whiteboard.
Yeah, please do, Michelle.
I just want to see if it works. Oh, so we've saved the whiteboard. I'm just not quite sure how to get it back now. Okay, maybe someone can tell me how to do that.
Oh yes, so
It's
we have also worked with the whiteboard, and you go to the Zoom in your Finder, and over there under the date of today, it's saved.
It saves there. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, it looks like everyone that's coming back has come back. So
Hi, Mr. Gary.
yeah, who's that?
Yeah, I'm Thirumal. I'm from India.
Hey, Thirumal.
In between, I got disconnected, so I got disconnected. So I just resumed again. I just joined.
Okay,
am I
no worries.
audible?
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'm actually going to share my screen from the iPad again, because I'm going to try and capture some of the data as it comes, and maybe we'll go room by room. I think we're not sure, because we didn't travel around the rooms, if all the rooms were occupied. I'm not sure that some of them were, but we'll go through them by characteristic, and we'll just take some feedback, and then I will try and capture some of it that I can hear, and we'll just listen to the discussion. So I'm going to go to the people that were in room 1, who were looking at understanding self-worth, and if somebody from room 1 is able to share for us some of the things that you talked about and some of the things that you captured.
Sure. Hi, Gary.
Hey.
This is Shashidhar.
Hey.
Okay, I would be talking about what we discussed. Okay, so the idea was we would do a world cafe and to take up the 4 different topics individually, assuming this would be a group. Okay, and let's assume it's about a group of about 5 in each group.
Yeah.
And each group will have one individual topic, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay, and yeah, based on the World Cafe, each group will have its own discussion, and one individual will switch to the next one. That way, and this would be done at least 4 times, so that each individual have an understanding of every element of self-worth. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, you mean take one of the descriptors? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. I'm with you. Perfect. Thank you. And then so some people would move around and some people would stay with each table.
That's right. So making sure that each one of them get an understanding of the other topic as well. They have an understanding as well. That was the whole idea that we discussed.
Perfect. Thank you. Did you discuss anything else in your group around understanding self-worth?
Well, we had a very limited time, so I think we closed on this, and we were done with 15 minutes.
Cool. Okay. Wow. Thank you very much. So
did I miss on anything?
Gary, can I add here? Mahi this side from group. So we did share using technique for understanding self-worth using forum data, giving them a situation and working on the forum data.
Sorry, could you say that again for me? Because it cutting out, or drop it into the chat for me and then I can see it.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. You were just cutting out a couple of times. Okay, I'm going to go to room 8 because I think room 8 also had understanding self-worth. Is there somebody from room 8 that would be happy to share what you had?
So hi Gary, this is Kala from room 8.
Hey.
And hi, yeah. So whatever emerged was storytelling was a very powerful tool. Storytelling uses using images and appreciative inquiry.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of us, the topics that we discussed like what's your story. There was something called the hot seat, where each person was supposed to be sitting in the middle of a circle, and in the form of appreciative inquiry, people would talk about his or her positive attributes. So, and there was something called the strength silhouette, which was very beautiful, and it also emerged from what you said about the strengths that you see that you have and the strengths that people see, right? So that was called the strength silhouette also.
It was called the what, sorry?
The strength silhouette.
Ah, okay, strength silhouette.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to apologize for my spelling.
No worries. SDK, spellings don't count.
Yeah, we have a spell checker for that, right?
Yeah, okay. So this is what we had from our group. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So what I will also do is I will make sure that what I'm capturing on the iPad, I will also make available after the session. So you'll get some of this from each of the groups. Okay, so that's the two groups that looked after understanding self-worth. So let's go to room 2. And room 2, I think you had having personal responsibility. Is there someone that's happy to share what you captured in your discussions for taking personal responsibility? Anyone? Was there anyone in that room, in room 2?
Yeah, Gary, we were with Suraj and Hultrud, and Hultrud had to share a process where we would like to share an applied theater method of playback theater and image theater.
Okay.
Playback theater works on the original stories of the audience, and there is a lot of alter ego methodology being done in playback. Playback people's stories, and you can see it live. So when people see their stories live, they can get many insights of where they were and where they can be. And while image theater is more towards, so playback is more from past to the present. Image theater is something which prepares you for future. So image theater, where there are theater exercises and games where a group has to complete an image, and each person is responsible to contribute his or her part. And without that, the image is not complete.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I think the other room that was there was room 9, if you have anything to add, although I suspect that might have been an empty room. Was anybody in room 9 on personal responsibility?
Hultrud had a great idea. Hultrud, would you like to share if you're there about the sociology?
Yeah, I was in the same group as Chetna, but if there was nobody in group 9, I can share another idea.
Yeah, no, please do, yeah.
Yeah, it is having a group of people, and everybody has to rate for him or herself in the beginning how happy he or she is with, and then you have a topic like the job. How happy are you in your job? How happy are you with your closest relationships? How happy are you depending on what you have? And then every person gets a sheet of paper and can write down the most important reasons why it is not the highest number of points on the scale.
Okay.
What comes to their mind, and then put next to that reason, so to speak, how he or she sees the personal responsibility in that. Is it more that it is circumstances? Is it, the boss or the company or the culture, or is it something? And you start from there, and people usually show very different values. So some are more like higher numbers for they attribute it to themselves. Others have more an outside view, like it is more the environment in what. And then you start talking about what something to change the situation. How much do you feel you can do about it? And you discuss these cases with persons that are willing, also in the group. So they present what they can do, and they get the feedback from colleagues, and they can discuss, can they maybe do more? So they, in the end, they can rate themselves another time. Okay, maybe, and usually the numbers are higher. What can I do about it? It's they feel, okay, I've got new ideas, I've got new power, I've got new perspective. So I rate, I have more responsibility for the situation, that it is not optimal, and I have more responsibility for finding a solution.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the ad. As I said, we suspected room 9 might be empty because Viral joined us back in the main room because he was the only one there. Okay, let's move to the next one, which is having self-discipline, and let's go to room 3.
All right, I would like to help the team to summarize what we had discussed just now. So our facilitation will be done in 3 steps. Step 1 is on define what is self-discipline, try to calibrate the understanding of the group members, the degree of of commitments, levels, etc. So kind of define this first. Then come to step 2, we will do in probably small groups. This is based on the assumptions that the team had already got some concrete plan or something to do to deal with the change now and the future.
Yeah.
So we will ask them to do some reflections and then to do some self-assessment to what level they are in terms of their commitment towards the plan that they kind of work out earlier.
Yeah.
And then we will come to step 3 after this to check what is stopping them to get a higher point examples. So what is the risks and what is the potential roadblocks that's standing ahead? Then we will ask them to come up some action plan for themselves.
Cool.
Yeah, team members, if I miss anything, maybe you can just add up.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tan. It's Jack, right? Thank you, Jack.
Yep, Jack, from Malaysia.
Okay, what about, where are we? Room 10.
I guess we must be group 10 then, because we also had the self-discipline, because we couldn't remember what group we were. So, couple of thoughts that came up in our group, and please people add if I miss anything. Things that came up were like, if you want to work on having self-discipline, goals, having your goals aligned to give you focus is an important one. Having time frames in place. Then people were referring a bit to how they are looking at it themselves in these days. So things like developing habits or routines so that you learn something every day, doing these things, they bring you from small changes that can lead to bigger things. One of us was also saying, like, these days, self-discipline is simple things like, if you're working from home, you still want to get up in time, go to bed in time, have a way of organizing your work during the day. So plan your day, have it structured, because otherwise it's never going to work. How to bring that to groups was then, well, why not have joint planning sessions with the team? How are we going to do it? How are we going to maintain focus? How are we going to stay on track? And also follow up with groups after the sessions as well. Then we had suggestions on metrics that could be used. So the urgent versus important, the GROW model, the stop, start, continue came up as well. And then what else was there?
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask you to pause. There's a lot of really great stuff in there, just because I'm conscious of the time and I want to make sure we get through all the groups. So, but thank you for there's some really good stuff in there. So I'm going to move to room 4, and room 4 was connecting through social networks. Somebody happy to share there?
Yes, me.
Okay.
we discussed many techniques, and for the parts of behaviors and characteristics, we thought of encouraging people, motivating, sharing knowledge and experiences, and trust building. And also our group members mentioned about various icebreakers and games that can be used to make people connected to each other, and also mentioning about the breaks. For instance, Kata mentioned that in short breaks or even at lunchtime, she gives some minor tasks to people to do it, and in that way they can be connected more. And also having enough time and proper tool and technique for introduction. And Ash also introduced a technique called MIVI, and I may ask her to explain. Ash, please.
And also, could you drop how you spell that into the chat for me as well?
Yes. If
okay.
I'm right it correctly.
Ah, MIVI. Okay, cool. Thank you. Does anyone, whoever who suggested MIVI, very quickly give a definition of what that is? Okay, don't worry. Let's move to the other group. So that was room 11. Anything you'd like to add to connecting through social networks?
Yeah, we were looking at the slide of the model, and one of the first things that came up was to identify your own social network.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important beginning. Otherwise, you think you're all alone and so on. The other aspect of the model was having a dialogue. And what we discussed was that it need not be too complicated in terms of coming up with tools and processes, important as those are, but just a very basic question as how are you doing, how are you feeling? And that in itself, getting people to talk about that is very beneficial, in fact, very therapeutic in a time of transition, of change, of new norms, etc. And we also discovered from our own experiences as we discussed and shared that this cannot also continue indefinitely, because when people just keep talking about how bad they feel and how lousy things are and all that, it doesn't get anywhere. We are going around the mulberry bush. So the other thing that we also talked about was at some point in the discussion as we go through the phases, we need to be agenda-driven, goal-oriented, and very intentional, directed about where are we taking this conversation. So it isn't just about anything goes, but we need to direct it somewhere so that it is productive, beneficial, and it lands and anchors in some personal beneficial action point and task that will drive us forward out of that quadrant of the, being, getting out of that mire of maybe self-pity or that we can't do anything, we're a victim. Yeah, so that's kind of in the main what we discussed.
Great, thank you. Right, let's move swiftly on because I'm super conscious of the time. So let's go to room 5, holistic approach.
Yeah. Sorry, please go ahead.
You go ahead then.
Okay. So tracking the holistic approach, what we discussed was a couple of very interesting things that came out. We said we need to create an open environment which is very supportive, and there is a lot of trust internally between people, and there is no insecurity. So this probably could be done by multiple ways of team building activities and stuff like this. We spoke about asking for help without feeling conscious about the fact that I am not good at something, but being confident about asking for help. Analyzing perspective and looking at people from situation and people from multiple perspective and gaining their understanding. Having a futuristic approach where we are saying we will look at the future and backtrack it to the current scenario. So I know there is a holistic approach I'm looking at, a clear definition of goal. When we are setting them, also contest setting. I think one thing which came out very strongly and we all agreed on was having a defined purpose and explaining that purpose to the group to know why we are looking at the bigger picture. And also the last thing that came out, yes, and how they're going to benefit out of it. I think one of the most important thing that came up towards the end was we were looking at what is my contribution going to be in the bigger picture that we are seeing.
Yeah.
So you know, and what is the benefit I'm going to gain out of it. That's predominantly what came up in our group discussion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And I can see that there's some additional stuff being dropped into the chat. So we'll make sure that the chat gets saved as well. Okay, room 12.
Yeah, we're thinking of using an audit conversation.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with it. Yeah, taking people to look at their job, observe how their job, and then how it relates to the other position in the company. What does it mean to them? How it will affect them, and what are they going to do to make themselves relevant to the new situation?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. Room 6, being open. We're getting there, folks.
Yeah, being open. We discussed about expansive thinking and reductive thinking. We also looked into how people tend to be in the box, and ideally you would go outside the box, in the box, or consider not even having a box at all.
Yeah.
You were looking into positioning of just open to learning, open to adaptation. That's my that's my recollection of what the discussion. If any of my group mates would want to share, please do share.
Okay. Okay, and then let's go to room 13. And is it room 13? Did you have the whiteboard that you wanted to share?
The whiteboard we are going to share is about managing well-being. So it's the next one.
Yeah, that's next. So let's hold that. So room 13, was there anything you wanted to add to being open? Was there anyone in room 13?
Yeah, yes, it's Michelle. Michelle has to turn on his microphone to speak because she was our scrib.
Okay.
Sorry everyone, I was talking out and I didn't notice that I was on mute, sorry. So we had under warm-up exercises, of course, icebreakers, using metaphors or the moodometer. We had using inspirational videos and following up with a debrief questioning or questions, using the ORID, the ORID model.
Yeah.
We had used outbound exercises like night trial, trust walks, and adventure activities. We had using the appreciative inquiry framework.
Yeah.
The liberating structure 1, 2, 4 for all.
Yeah.
We've got the secret ballot. Another tool was the word association. There was alternative future scenarios as a tool. And asking participants to be the defender or the opposite opinion. And then the last note was around the improv technique, but I couldn't get that last point.
Oh, no worries. That's great. Thank you. Wow, you've got lots of tools.
It's the yes and technique. Yes and.
Oh, yes and. Okay, yeah.
And just to add, it was also, we discussed about the fact to make a safe space to allow people to express themselves. So it was really about all these techniques could be used if we build a safe space.
Brilliant.
Safe
Thank you very
environment.
much. So let's go to the last characteristic, and I know that one group has a whiteboard, so maybe I'm not sure if it was room 7 or 14, but maybe you could share your whiteboard.
Yes, and nevertheless, it would require that you are stopping sharing your.
Yeah,
otherwise it doesn't work. I can also simply read it. It's also possible.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. And we have started with sharing actually, which isn't recorded here, or this is our last comment actually, that we need to distinguish between the spiritual, mental, and also emotional, physical well-being, so the 4 levels. And then we brainstormed, so you can see just a question. For example, people in small groups, 8 to 10 people, can discuss how are you feeling now, and is there anything you would like to do for your well-being? So something really like a small intervention, opening a window, having a sip of coffee, whatever. Then the 3 M's, so change your energy through movement, meditation, and motivation. So really to get people inspired, but also move. Very important in our times where everybody sticks to the laptop or iPad. And equally important to plan and really to address breaks. So whenever we are facilitating something, to remind our participants to have a short break, to have a sip of water, maybe other beverages, to take also rest, maybe like 5-10 minutes. And then one more idea, sharing an object and saying why it makes you feel good. So really grabbing something from your desk or from your environment and saying, oh, this is really important for me right now because it makes me feel good. And we actually applied it immediately in our group, which was really fun. And then your view. So just move to the window and show what you are seeing in this very moment. Just also, you know, enhancing well-being, also not only yours, but also other participants, connecting to the nature. 2 interventions regarding visualization. 1, draw and share on the screen. The other one, show a piece of art combined with a powerful question. So for example, a beautiful portrait of, I don't know, a female artist, and asking the question, how would you portray yourself right now when you really feel good? So really something pretty creative. And thinking of something positive, what is happening now. I think this is one of the suggestions that was thought further, and maybe I can ask the participant who came up with this idea, because it was really brilliant. And it was the moment when the breakout room was almost over.
Cool, brilliant, thank you very much. So if you can just stop sharing, and I'll go back to sharing mine. Okay, and then finally, room 14. If you are still there, if you have something you'd like to add, I'm very super conscious of the time, so I don't want to rush too much. But room 14, anything you'd like to add? Anyone? Okay. So what we've done there is we've captured all of these really great things that you can do to build or extend or develop each of the key characteristics. And I'm going to, what I'll do is I'm going to switch screens again, and I will make sure that I share this with you, so as you've got all of this stuff that we've captured on the iPad as well. And I'm just going to quickly respond to somebody has put in the chat around what's the name of the tool that I'm using to write live using like a flip chart. So I'm using my iPad to do that. I'm using a pencil to do that, and I'm actually using, and I'm sharing the screen and using an app which is called Paper, P-A-P-E-R. There are a lot of drawing tools, and I've tried all of them, and the one that I like best is paper. It's much more real to how you actually do stuff. So very quickly, I'm going to share my screen here just to wrap out the session. Somebody asked me to go back to the transition curve, so I'm a bit further on. I'm going to quickly skip to where I was. So the idea of building resilience, as we said, is to build higher resilience, which makes this transition less turbulent. So it means that you're moving from the current situation to whatever the new dynamic balance situation is in a much less turbulent way. And you can see that the things that you've identified can all help build characteristics and help you move along that line. What we would also add, though, is that not everybody needs to develop all 7. So it might be that in your personal situation, the thing that you need to do more is to be more open and take an holistic approach. So it might be that you might be strong and feel that you're quite well developed in some of these characteristics, but actually it's just 1 or 2 or 3 that you might like to build and extend, rather than necessarily focusing on all 7. And of course, because the transition curve is an individual transition curve, everybody's building resilience, building these key characteristics, excuse me, is going to be individual as well. So whilst I might want to build and develop being open and taking a holistic approach, other people might want to build and develop other characteristics. And what we're trying to do is to encourage people to build their own personal blueprint for building higher resilience. I just wanted to say a few things just by way of close, because I'm very conscious that we've got probably 2 or 3 minutes left. I've already said that I'll happily make the slides available. I've already said that I'll happily make the digital capture in paper available, so as you've got access to all of that came out in that last session. Just to close finally, this is at the back of the slide deck, so you'll get this obviously. There's a number of key resources that we found really helpful. So I mentioned the Connor book, Managing at the Speed of Change. I mentioned the Bridges book, Managing Transitions. About halfway down, you can see here, there is a book called On Death or Dying, which is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's original bereavement model, which the transition curve is based on. And a number of other resources that the 2 young women that did the research for us found really helpful. So hopefully you'll find some of these really helpful too. I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Rengin and Goli for supporting me throughout the session. I wanted to say thank you for the IAF Turkey design team for the opportunity to share with you some of the stuff we've been working on and continue to work on, and that we're finding that it is particularly topical right now. I wanted to thank you all for attending and for staying to play and joining in the breakout sessions and sharing some really great stuff. And this is also the last slide of the slide deck which you'll receive. And I'm more than happy to be contacted in any way in any of those things. So email, website, we have a Twitter account, we have a LinkedIn account. And actually there is also now a Circle Indigo LinkedIn page if you're interested in joining with us there. And we have an Instagram feed just called Circle Indigo. So I'm going to hand back to Rengin. Again, just thank you all for sticking with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival if that's what you're planning to do. Rengin.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. It is really very teaching and inspiring workshop. Thank you very much. And thank you all of our participants for your contributions, and hope you to have a great time during our festival. Bye for now. Ciao.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next session starting.
Good job.
Thank you,
Thank
Gary.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Gary.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Great job. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Great job. Bye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Bye.
So much. Bye-bye.
Rengin, I'm going to save this chat before I log off, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
What time do we have the next session
hello,
starting?
Hello, Renin. May I know what time would be the next session would start?
I will right now check it. Sorry.
What time would the next session would start?
In 15 minutes.
Oh, great.
~3 Istanbul.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Enjoy. Goodbye.
Thank you, Gary. Fantastic session.
Thank you. Okay, I've saved the chat that finished there with Anna's comment about how to go to another session. So I've got all of that chat saved. So I will run through that and try and pick out if there's anything useful and add it to the stuff that I captured on the iPad.
I've saved the chat as well.
Cool.
Okay, I did it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so again, I just whilst you're both still here, thank you to Rengin and thank you to Goli for support during the session. Thank you, Raina, for being with us too.
Thank you too. Thanks for the session.
It was really great to see, well, to see you, especially Rengin and Raina again. Haven't seen you for such a long time. Goli, really nice to meet you. And actually, I was flicking through the screens. It was just really nice to see some familiar faces. That's always helpful, I think, when you get into these things, to see some people that you actually know. Sometimes it's more daunting seeing some familiar faces, and sometimes it's not.
I would like to say that I love the technology, your ability to use technology. Using iPad is something wonderful. I really like it, and I will try to use it.
Yeah, if you're going to do it that way, I really suggest using paper. It's just called PAPR. It was originally put together by a company called 53, but I think it's actually now owned by WeTransfer. Is it WeTransfer? Is that what they're called?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think WeTransfer bought out 53, but it's a really great app. I mean, the basic one is good, and then it's worth spending just a little bit of money to buy all the extra brushes and pencils and that you can use. But it's the one that I found easiest to use. I use it for taking notes, mind mapping, drawing, everything. So
it is really, we need a lot. I felt that such as I'm in a classroom, in a meeting room.
Yeah.
That feeling, and it's really very important.
Yeah, I think it is. That's why I like to use it.
Just human.
Well, it's also, I mean, we're getting so used to using all these, proper technical tools that actually sometimes just being able to write and see stuff being written is has a bit more of a personal touch. Anyway, look, I can see people are waiting to come in. So I'm going to do that. I'll save it. I'll make sure I send it to all of you, Raina, Rengin, and Goli. Thanks again for all your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. It
all
was
the best
great.
for the rest of the festival. Take good care.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you. Sorry, Rena, can you please send the link for the survey?
Which one, sorry?
Do you have it?
Which one?
The survey, the form.
Yeah, I have it. I'll just send it now.
Can you please send it by Gmail? I mean, through email?
Sure. It's on your Gmail.
Okay, thank you. So, Rengin, it seems that you have to go to another link, and tomorrow we'll join in here, yeah? And it's still recording. Should I stop it?
Please.
It says working with your superpowers. I think it has